Take a look at how we deploy storage spaces in the context of an Azure-based virtual machine. Now, what I'm beginning with is a virtual machine that's already deployed in Azure. You'll notice this is a DS8 V3 virtual machine. That one allows me up to 16 data disks to be attached. So the number of disks you have is determined by the size of the VM that you elect to deploy. So that's part of your capacity planning. If you know you need a certain number of IOPS, you know you need a certain amount of space, that goes into the number of disks you need, which determines the size of the VM that you need to deploy. So this one supports up to 16 disks, and we're going to go ahead and just add an additional data disk. So I'm going to go to my disks settings in the VM, and we're just going to add a new managed data disk. So we'll click Create Disk, give it a name. I'm just going to call this one Extra Disk. The resource group that the managed disk is going to be created in. And then the size will go to 128 on this guy here. And you can see the limits, 5,000 IOPS and 200 megabit per second. Call this one Extra Disk 1. I've already created one called Extra Disk. And we'll click Create. And so this is going to go ahead and create that new managed disk. Takes just a second to create the disk. And then once the creation is completed, we're going to go and attach it to the virtual machine. Now, while that's attaching there and well, creating in the background, here's the VM that we're actually working with. And so I've got the VM, I've RDP'd into the VM, and you can see that it's got 2 disks currently assigned, the operating system and also the temporary drive. So I'm just looking in Server Manager at the volumes. So that's now been attached. We're going to go ahead and save it. This will attach the disk to the virtual machine. And when we see that job complete here in the background, we'll be able to come in and see that that disk is now visible inside the Azure virtual machine. It's still updating. Just want to let that finish. Okay, the job is complete. Let's refresh Server Manager inside the VM. And we'll see that we've now got the additional disk. Now, to create storage spaces, you obviously need a lot of disks. You need at least 3. So to create multiple disks and attach them, we're going to use a simple PowerShell script. So here I've got a little PowerShell script that I've already written. And we'll just kind of walk through this very briefly. So I've got the name of my resource group. I've already logged in, by the way. Name of the resource group, the name of the location, which is West US, the storage account type, and then I've got a little bit of code that will actually attach up to 10 data disks. So data disk 1 all the way up through data disk 10. So we're going to go ahead and run this PowerShell. Now this is going to create 10 individual disks, so this takes a little bit of time to run. We're going to let this run in the background. When it finishes, we'll update our virtual machine and see that we've got all 10 disks attached, which is the basis to now go in and create a storage space to get better storage, better capacity, and better performance on that virtual machine. I'm just switched back into the Azure portal. And if we look back in the Azure portal, look at our resource groups. I've got a resource group called Spaces where this virtual machine exists, and you can see we're beginning to get these data disks come in. So if I just refresh the view, there's disk 0, disk 1. Refresh it a couple more times, we should get a disk 2 here in just a few seconds. And there's disk 2. So we'll let this run along in the background and come back when it's finished. So our script is finished, and we've now got 10 brand new, freshly minted data disks. And they've been actually 11 because we began with 0 and we were all the way to 10. So we've got 11. And we've attached those to our virtual machine in this little bit of PowerShell as well here. And the last thing we've got to do now is actually update the virtual machine definition. So we'll go ahead and run that, and that'll take just a couple of seconds. What that's going to do is actually make those attached disks live in the virtual machine. So we're going to come back to my virtual machine. I'm going to refresh, and this will take just a couple of seconds, but as this job completes, you'll see those disks begin to appear inside Server Manager in the actual virtual machine. You can see the first one just came in. I'll refresh this a couple more times. All right, and so here we can see now our data disks have all appeared. Scroll down to verify, we see up to 10 individual disks, 10, 12, 13, there we go, perfect. So we've now got 13 disks, the original 3, plus the 11 I created, the original 2 plus the 11 I created. So what we can do now is go ahead and create a new storage space. So we'll go to my storage pools, and we're going to create a new storage pool. And the rest of this is standard Windows Server administration stuff. Call this one Pool 1. Select all the available physical disks. Create. Create a virtual disk. No storage tiers. Again, at this point, we're essentially picking all the defaults. We'll do a parity layout, single parity, fixed provisioning, maximum size, and then finally create and format the volume. And this will produce for us within Windows Explorer here in just a second our brand new drive F of 1.18 terabytes. And so there you have it. I now have a 13 disk storage spaces direct volume. I should say a storage spaces volume, not a storage spaces direct, which is clustering, but a storage spaces volume. And it's actually not based on 13 disks, it's based on 12 disks. So minor discrepancy, but there's a lot of disks, so I tend to lose count. So there we have it. That's using Azure Storage, using in particular managed disks, and creating a Windows storage spaces volume.